The Electro-Voice RE20 has been an essential broadcast dynamic microphone for over the last 50 years. This beige monstrosity has been graced by the vocals of Sir Paul McCartney, Bob Dylan, and even Radiohead. However, the RE20 really gets its notoriety for its enduring presence in spoken word applications like talk shows and podcasts. Given the RE20's reputation, this should be a killer microphone for live streamers looking for that kind of end game microphone that we look to those $400 price range microphones for. Not only that, I think that there are some things about the Electro-Voice RE20 that are really fascinating to learn about from a microphone perspective. I'm John Horstman, and today in the first installment of my Streamer Mic series, we're going to take a look and see if the RE20 has what it takes to be a streamer staple. Before we get started, I am John Horstman. I also go as KickedTripod, and I design technology for streamers and content creators. And when I'm not doing that, I try to take what I've learned and make cool videos about them. If you do like this video, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and of course, if you want to get a notification anytime I post a video, you can click the bell as well. Oh yeah, and don't forget to follow me at my social links down below too. Okay, so let's dive in. And as I said before, we're going to be reviewing the RE20 today, and I want to review these microphones with a little bit different scope in mind. I want to review it from the perspective of a streamer or, to a lesser extent, a podcaster looking for a microphone. What that means is that we're going to spend a little less time on things that aren't really relevant for streamers and podcasters, but we're going to spend a little bit more time on the things that are. But at the same time, I don't want to shy away from those technical specifications that are important for a streamer to know, like frequency response curves and gain requirements. After we've put the microphone through its paces, we're going to then give the microphone a grade based on the different things we discussed in the video. One last note is that you will see a little icon down here that's either a raindrop or a cactus to determine if I'm using a wet or a dry signal. A raindrop means it's using a wet signal, which means that I'm applying EQ and compression and gating to what I think sounds good. A dry signal is just me going through my interface with no other additional effects on it, except for maybe a little bit of boost to make sure that the volume levels are equal. Okay, with all that in mind, let's talk about tech specs. The Electro-Voice RE20 is a cardioid broadcast dynamic microphone, and at the time of this recording, sells for about $449 US. While the microphone doesn't come with a shock mount in the box, there are a lot of bundles out there on Amazon, B&H Photo, Sweetwater, that usually does bundle this microphone with a either first-party or third-party shock mount for very little, if any, extra money. And since we're on the topic of it, I am using a third-party shock mount, but the 309A I have owned, and honestly, between the 3 or 4 third-party shock mounts and the first-party one, I really haven't noticed a meaningful difference. The Electro-Voice RE20 has a frequency response range of 20 Hz to 20 kilohertz, which is pretty standard. On the back of the microphone, you do have a bass roll-off switch that will let you take even more of the bass off the mic if you need to. And currently right now, I'm recording with 48 decibels of gain through the goxlr. For the dry signal, I am adding 5 decibels boosted in post just to make the recordings more even. It's a sad truth that while microphone aesthetics are important for streamers and content creators making content on cameras, microphone manufacturers aren't great at making amazing looking microphones. The Electro-Voice RE20 in its signature, they try to call it silver. It's definitely borderline gray. I'm calling it beige at this point. Thankfully though, Electro-Voice did smarten up last year and they actually released a black version of this exact same microphone. And honestly, if there's one thing that I really dislike about this microphone, it's the physical color of the kind of traditional RE20 style. Now you can kind of get away calling it retro and old school and vintage, but unless you're kind of a microphone connoisseur, you're probably not going to recognize that this is a microphone with 50 years of heritage. In fact, this microphone is so ugly that last year I was helping Pokimane set up her microphone and tune in her voice. And we were talking about microphone recommendations, and I recommended this microphone for her. She was actually really cautious about getting it because of how big it is and how it looks on the screen. This is not a pretty color at all. You'll notice now that she went from the beige RE20 to the black one as soon as she found that one came out. One other thing to note, and I've kind of skirted around it, is this microphone is big, even bigger with the shock mount. I have mine off to the side, and it's no problem. It blocks a little bit of my side monitor here, but it's not anything that I can't get around. But if you do have a monitor set up where you can't have something like this in your way, that's going to be something really important to consider when you're looking at the RE20. So one thing that I do want to make a normal thing on my microphone reviews is I want to actually spend a little extra time on the frequency response curve. Normally these get glossed over or just thrown up, but we don't actually explain what that has to do for you, the person who's actually looking at buying the microphone. To do that, I'm going to have a frequency response curve down below, and I'm going to break it up into these various sections. The light blue represents the sub-bass portion of somebody's voice. If I had to kind of explain it simply, it's the part of the voice that you don't really hear as much as you feel. The pink section is where you're going to find most of the bass in your voice, but it's also where we're going to deal with the muddiness in your voice. The green section is what I call broadcast frequencies. These frequencies really determine how broadcasty, radio-style vocally you sound versus how natural and kind of audiobook narration-y you sound. This is also the part of your voice that's really going to split the bass from the treble. At around 1 kHz, we start getting into the nasally frequencies, the part of your voice that's kind of The purple represents our low and mid highs. This is also where some of those really harsh frequencies live, like your shushes and your S's. And then finally, the orange is what I just call air or airiness. It's kind of what gives a real brightness to your voice, and it's almost kind of breathy. I'm not going to do this every time we talk about the frequency response curve in future videos, but I wanted to do it for this first one. So let's take a look at the frequency response curve. To many, this probably looks like a pretty boring flat graph, and honestly, for a lot of people it is. But there are a few things to take away from looking at this. First, you can see a small cut in the mid frequencies, which helps give it its signature broadcast sound. Second, there are notable cuts at about 2 kHz and 5 kHz, which is perfect because that's right where your shushes and your S's live in your voice. So on paper, this means that even outside of the box, you should have a pretty solid foundation for a good sounding microphone that's really more optimized for spoken word in somebody's voice. Okay, so now we're going to go into some sound tests of the RE20, and there's a few different parts. We're going to do some of the basic plosive tests, as well as keyboard sound tests, off-axis noise rejection tests, and like just sound tests to hear how effective the shock mount is. You're also going to hear myself and my wife Katie doing some various voiceover with wet and dry signals, so you can kind of get how the microphone sounds through that as well. But let's start first with some keyboard tests. And the first one I'm going to do is I've got this guy right here. It's my personal keyboard I use. It's using ZealPC Zelio 65 grams V2s. So I'm going to go ahead and just type on this for a little bit. I also have a keyboard with Gateron Blue switches on. This is the Keychron K1, I believe. And I will go ahead and do some tests on that now. One important aspect of having a really great sounding microphone is making sure that it can just reject your everyday noises. We already did the keyboard test. Now I want to do the sound rejection test, where I'm going to touch different parts of my mic stand, my boom stand, my desk, to see how it fares with the shock mount and without it. Down at the base. And on the desk. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a look at the off-axis rejection of the RE20 by going around the microphone and just talking into it. This is me talking directly into the microphone. This is me talking approximately 45 degrees from the microphone. This is me talking at 90 degrees from the microphone. This is me talking behind the microphone. The next thing I want to do is go through some different audio tests between my wife Katie and I to see how they sound both wet and dry, with the pop filter and without.
But at the end of my life, when I'm sitting on my yacht, am I going to be thinking about how much money I have? No. I'm going to be thinking about how many friends I have, my children, and my comedy albums. I mean, I have a yacht, so obviously did pretty well money-wise.
But at the end of my life, when I'm sitting on my yacht, am I going to be thinking about how much money I have? No. I'm going to be thinking about how many friends I have, and my children, and my comedy albums. I mean, I have a yacht, so I obviously did pretty well money-wise.
But at the end of my life, when I'm sitting on my yacht, am I going to be thinking about how much money I have? No. I'm going to be thinking about how many friends I have, and my children, and my comedy albums. I mean, I have a yacht, so obviously did pretty well money-wise.
But at the end of my life, when I'm sitting on my yacht, am I going to be thinking about how much money I have? No, I'm going to be thinking about how many friends I have, and my children, and my comedy albums. I mean, I have a yacht, so I obviously did pretty well money-wise. So there's a lot to unpack here with all of these tests. First of all, a shock mount is obviously valuable for this microphone, but honestly, for any microphone, if you are worried about bumping your desk, picking up your mouse and slamming it down when you're moving in faster FPS games, bumping the boom stand, you're going to want an external shock mount, whether it's the RE20 or anything else. This is one of the things that I think get overlooked the most when you're looking to buy a microphone. The RE20 definitely does have some plosive issues, so you definitely want to be talking into this off-axis or have some sort of pop filter. You can also do the bass roll-off as well, but I find with most people, keeping that really full low end is really important to getting your desired sound, and I would use that as a last resort. As with most dynamic microphones, the off-axis rejection is quite good. It doesn't pick up a ton from the sides or the back of the microphone. It's just a really solid microphone there. All right, normally when we talk about microphones, there's very little to differentiate them. They have different enclosures. They might have a couple extra switches, a fancy color, or some other mounting mechanism that allows for some differentiation. However, Electro-Voice microphones, and the RE20 included, have one key differentiator that is really worth talking about, and that is variable D. Variable D gets its name because announcers and broadcasters were needing a microphone that they could use at varying distance and still get solid results. Another side effect of variable D is that it reduces heavily the proximity effect, that exaggerated bass response that you get when you get really close to a microphone. Now, the proximity effect is not a bad thing. A lot of people really prefer it. It's that full bassiness, and you still get that with the RE20, but you don't get the over-exaggerated bass that can be hard to tune out without really getting rid of your low end or really having issues with plosives. How the RE20 and other microphones do this is with this chamber design across the sides of the microphone. The slots furthest away from the end of the mic in the capsule let the bass frequencies in, while the ones closest to it are letting the high frequencies in. So what does this mean for streamers? Well, it means that you can be a lot less disciplined with how you use this microphone. You can use it directly on axis. You can use it off axis. You can get quite a bit away from the microphone if that's what your room will allow you to do. Obviously, there's going to be gain implications involved, but there's going to be a far less difference between being right up into the microphone and being a bit farther back. If you're a streamer that can't be bothered to sit still, you move around a lot, or you just don't have great microphone technique or forget about it, a microphone with variable D is going to really come in handy for you. So let's bring up the report card and see how the RE20 scores. Let's start with price, and for that, I give it a D+. $449 is a lot for a microphone. It's $50 more than the Shure SM7B. It's a significant investment, and it's probably not wise if you're just starting out. We'll do a video about this in the future, and I'm not saying that a $100 or $200 dynamic microphone is going to sound the same as a $400 one, because I don't believe that at all. But I do believe that there is a diminishing return that happens when you start getting into the $400 microphones versus the $200 microphones, and you really need to weigh that value for yourself. Aesthetics, I give a C+. Excluding this beige monstrosity that we have here, the RE20 in black is actually a really great looking microphone. With the shock mount though, the RE20 does get to be a little bit unwieldy, and for some people it's going to be too big to incorporate into their setup. That being said, the shock mount obviously works. I think it's one of the best shock mounts that you can get for those $400 microphones that we often compare these to, and because of that, it rejects a lot of those unwanted noises from bumps on the boom arm itself or on your desk. So it's not an unwarranted design, it's just not the most aesthetically pleasing one. Dry sound, I give an A-. And when I grade dry sound, I do that with the understanding that you should want to post-process this microphone in some way. The RE20 does a lot of this work for you. Earlier in the video, we talked about that frequency response curves and how there were these clever cuts around those really troublesome frequencies when you are looking to EQ your voice. The nice thing about it though is it also doesn't take too many liberties there that might make the microphone kind of unwieldy to EQ later on, like some of those other cheaper microphones do to make them more audible and clear. Another great thing about this microphone is it's got a really quiet and tameable noise floor. There's no microphone in the world that's going to sound amazing with fans and air conditioners in the background. That's just not how microphones are designed to work. It goes against the law of physics. But for any reasonable recording space, the RE20 is great. Again, this is a fairly empty room, sparsely treated, very high ceilings. And the RE20 still sounds really good in here. Wet sound, I give it an A. The RE20 has a sound signature that is uniquely its own, and to a trained ear, you can tell when somebody's using it. That being said, it makes voices sound great and is very versatile for whatever types of recording you're looking to do. I've created a video about how I don't like blanket recommending microphones, and I really pointed that at the Shure SM7B. And I did that because it just isn't flexible enough for the wider range of voices that you need to account for in a blanket recommendation. The RE20 is the opposite though. There honestly is room for everybody. You won't quite get the bass response or a signature response out of the RE20 as you might a different microphone, but there's room for everyone's voice with this microphone. For interface dependency, I give it a B, and this feels like a weird thing to grade. But some microphones require a certain type of interface or a microphone activator to be able to get the best sound out of it. As a broadcast dynamic mic, it does need a little gain, though it's not as gain hungry as the SM7B. In the end, the gain requirements for the RE20 aren't unreasonable, and most of those really popular interfaces that get recommended in the $150 to $250 range should be more than plenty to be able to power this guy. On the cheaper ones, however, you may find yourself wanting some sort of microphone activator to make sure that that signal stays clean. And differentiators, I give a B+. Variable D, to me, is a really big deal. Unless you specifically want an exaggerated proximity effect, this is a net win for anybody doing broadcast vocals. The Electro-Voice microphones are also the only microphones that reliably can do this. There isn't much that can differentiate this microphone otherwise, but it looks unique, has proprietary technology, and so far, not a lot of people have been able to mimic it to any level of success. Overall, the RE20 is my favorite microphone, and I'm very happy and excited for this to be the first entry in my streamer mic series. A B+ is a super high score in my opinion, and I highly doubt I'll be able to score many microphones higher as we go through more of these popular streamer microphones. Ultimately, the RE20 doesn't get an A because it is really expensive and it does have some compromising aesthetics. However, if this is a microphone that is within your budget and you don't mind the bulk, it's hard to go wrong. As a side note, I don't like, and I've said this before, I don't like blanket recommendations on microphones. That's why I had Katie here doing her voiceover. I did voiceover. We did it from different angles and with and without pop filters because there's so much variance. But if I were going to blanket recommend the microphone for the streamer industry, I would love to see that shift. And I would love to see that shift away from the Shure SM7B as being that end goal microphone. And I would love for it to shift to this. I'm not even saying the RE20 is the superior microphone overall. I get why engineers and longtime audiophiles run to the SM7B, and it feels like it wins out in most of those videos and comparisons that you watch. But content creators really need a microphone that is clear, forgiving, has a low noise floor, and is able to give your voice a signature sound. The RE20 does that. And it does it really well. So what do you think? Am I overreacting on the RE20? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did like this video, please do subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell to find out whenever I post a new video. My name is John Horstman. I also go by KickedTripod. And if you do want to hear more from me, other than subscribing to the channel itself, you can follow me at all of my social media down below as well. We also have an open Discord where we regularly discuss new technology coming out for audio and for streamers, and we love keeping those conversations going with you. The link is down there as well. That's going to do it for our first installment of Streamer Mics. We'll see you next time.